Well, let's talk about this with our Ondine Sherwood, who's one of the co-founders of the Long Covid SOS group. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
We've heard so much about long COVID, especially, of course, once deaths and hospitalisations goes down. The focus has very much been on long COVID and preventing people from getting the disease and suffering long-term problems. I had COVID March last year. My taste buds sort of came back, came back. Still haven't got them back. There are still some items of food that just don't taste right. Luckily, wine and
Really?
chocolate, still all right. Do I officially count as a long COVID sufferer?
You could do if you still have symptoms. That would be considered long COVID, but I would say you're on the very, very mild end of the
Well,
spectrum.
indeed, now that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's interesting. I mean, long COVID, 4 weeks in, I was ill for 3 weeks. I certainly still felt pretty rough for a few weeks after that. But people can often feel pretty rough after many, respiratory illnesses or a bad dose of flu for quite a few weeks, sometimes often for months. Is this something we should actually be concerned about for most people who've had a relatively mild dose of COVID?
Well, yes, because we're looking at 13% of people are suffering for longer than 12 weeks. So yes, I think we should be concerned. In fact, when you introduced the segment, you said 900 odd thousand have had long COVID. These are people who have long COVID right now. And as you pointed out, around 400,000 have had it for a year. So it's not really the same as what happens after flu. And certainly from my experience, I expected to be a bit rough for a couple of weeks. And then I thought I was better. And then it came back, and this kept happening. And the problem is that, unlike you, and to me to some extent, because I'm also on the milder end of the spectrum, people are very, very debilitated and cannot return to work. And so what we have here is now a lot of very young people. Mainly young people are getting COVID now because the older people are vaccinated. And these are people who are making a major contribution towards the economy, and they won't be able to work. So it is a big problem. And it's interesting that you say we're hearing a lot about long COVID, but are we? Because when we hear the figures from the government, all the messaging is about hospitalizations and deaths, and it has been all the way through. And of course, those things are extremely important. But long COVID has always been a little bit of an afterthought. It's almost like the poor man of the COVID pandemic.
Well, I mean, it would be. I mean, no offence, it would be. It's rather less serious than hospitalisation and death. But the reality is that the vast majority of people who have COVID don't get long COVID. The vast majority of people who have a mild case don't get anything that is seriously debilitating. A lot of these cases are coming from people, you say that they're young people, but people who survived. But a lot of them are people who have actually had it really quite severely.
No, that's not the case. Most
Stats I
people were
saw
not.
suggested that.
No, it's most people were not hospitalized. So in fact, your initial infection with COVID, the severity of it, does not dictate whether you get long COVID. People who've been in ICU for many weeks, of course, will have serious ongoing issues which need rehabilitation. But really, we're looking at a huge number of people who were never hospitalized, who some of whom had a pretty mild infection and then go on to develop far more serious symptoms as time goes on. And this is the problem.
I've seen some reports that suggested that they think that that actually the level of people reporting these sorts of symptoms is remarkably similar to the level of people reporting these sorts of symptoms across the country anyway. The effects of lockdown, people not going to the doctor, the effects that people would expect from other respiratory diseases and other problems as well, and that this perhaps is being overplayed by some people. There'll be people who definitely 100% are massively debilitated. I'm not in any way disputing that, but that the a lot of the numbers that we're talking about are people who feel tired, feel fatigued, are having shortness of breath, but that it may not necessarily be as a result of having had COVID. What would you say to those people?
I would say that unfortunately there is no test for long COVID. There's no blood test that can definitively say whether somebody has it. However, what we're seeing is a lot of people are showing signs on imaging of organ damage. People have vascular damage. People are having problems, neurological problems. And yes, of course, lockdown is stressful, but the ONS have used controls for some of their studies, and they're finding that the reporting of these symptoms is way higher in the people who are identified as having long COVID. And I think that much as we would love to play it down, I think this is a major problem. And this is going to be a problem. We don't want to overwhelm the NHS now with hospitalizations, but who's to say say, this is really going to be a massive impact on the NHS and on the economy, because people can't go back to work in the way they were working before.
And these are, as you say, these are very young people, a lot of them who you know, in the prime of their life. I no doubt we'll be talking a lot more about this as the months and years go on. I think the NHS is going to be overwhelmed with a lot more cases of everything other than COVID as well. Ondine Sherwood, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.